They say Russia is playing the long game, that its slow advance is a sign of some inevitable grinding victory. But what if this isn't some genius strategy? What if it's the only desperate option left after its real plan collapsed in utter failure? See, to understand why Russia is not winning, you can't just look at today's static front lines. You have to go back to the beginning, to the audacious high-stakes gamble to take Kyiv in 3 days, a plan that was not just defeated, but humiliated. Is this the march of an inevitable victor, or the desperate stagger of an army haunted by the ghosts of Kyiv? How can a campaign built on a shattered foundation do anything but slowly crumble? And truth be told, if that initial blunder wasn't just a mistake but a mortal wound, is this war of attrition really a strategy? Or is it just the slow, painful goodbye of a supposed superpower? The true price of ambition. Look, any talk of a Russian victory rings completely hollow when measured against the staggering, unsustainable human cost of the invasion. The fact is, beyond the front lines lies a demographic catastrophe, a nation being hollowed out by battlefield losses and a mass exodus of its best and brightest. This self-inflicted wound, more than any territorial gain, defines the true outcome of the war. While the Kremlin stays predictably silent, Western intelligence and independent researchers paint a grim picture. By mid-2025, total Russian military casualties, eliminated, wounded, and missing, are approaching or have exceeded a truly grisly 1 million. The Center for Strategic and International Studies and the UK Ministry of Defence both project this milestone, with estimates for the number of eliminated soldiers alone reaching as high as 250,000. To put this disaster into perspective, consider this. In just over 3 years, Russia has lost 15 times more soldiers than the Soviet Union lost during its entire decades-long war in Afghanistan. It has lost 5 times more fatalities than Russia and the USSR suffered in all their combined wars in the 77 years between World War II and 2022.
Well, a BBC investigation alongside the independent Russian website Mediazona reveals that more than 50,000 Russian soldiers have died so far in the war.
Independent Russian media outlets like Mediazona and the BBC, through painstaking open-source analysis of public records, have confirmed a horrifying trend. The rate of death at the front has nearly doubled each year of the war. Make no mistake, this isn't the sign of a winning strategy. It's the result of tactical bankruptcy, of using human wave attacks where poorly trained mobilized men and convicts are treated as an expendable resource to be traded for inches of ground. But this carnage is only half of the story. The war has also triggered the largest brain drain from Russia in decades. Since the invasion, credible estimates suggest that well over 1 million Russian citizens have fled the country. And here's the kicker. These aren't just any people. They are overwhelmingly young, highly educated professionals, the IT specialists, scientists, and entrepreneurs who represent the nation's future. This mass exodus is pouring fuel on a pre-existing demographic crisis of low birth rates and high mortality. The war is simultaneously eliminating hundreds of thousands of young men in their prime, while driving the country's most innovative minds to leave, creating a demographic crater that will cripple Russia's economy and its capacity for development for generations. Frankly, this is a strategic own goal that no amount of captured territory could ever justify as a win. Deconstructing Russian military might. The pre-war image of a fearsome, modernized Russian military? Turns out that was one of the great strategic myths of the 21st century. The war in Ukraine has brutally deconstructed this myth, exposing an army plagued by logistical failures, technologically regressing, and forced into desperate tactical adaptations. You can see the most tangible proof in the vast junkyards of destroyed equipment across Ukraine. Open-source trackers have visually confirmed over 22,000 pieces of lost Russian military hardware, including thousands of tanks and armored vehicles. And this isn't a symmetrical fight. For much of the war, the ratio of Russian to Ukrainian equipment losses has been as high as 5-1 in Ukraine's favor. This unsustainable rate of loss has forced Russia into a kind of real-time military demodernization. Unable to produce new, modern equipment fast enough to replace its losses, the military has been compelled to reach deep into its decaying Soviet-era stockpiles. The result is the surreal spectacle of T-54 and T-55 tanks, first produced when Stalin was still alive, being pulled from storage and sent to a 21st century front line. Analysts estimate over 40% of Russia's Soviet-era tanks and armored vehicles have been removed from its largest storage base. At the end of the day, this is the hallmark of a military that is technologically regressing under the pressure of a war it cannot sustain. These equipment losses are a symptom of a deeper disease, a culture of rigid command, endemic corruption, and systemic logistical incompetence. The war revealed an army incapable of conducting complex operations, with insecure communications and a top-down command structure that stifles initiative. While Russia has adapted, most notably with the mass deployment of powerful glide bombs, these are reactive changes designed to mitigate profound deficiencies, not innovations that lead to decisive success. It has learned how to not lose quickly, but it has not learned how to win. The paper tiger has been exposed, and its attempts to rearm with the weapons of the past only underscore the depth of its present failure. How the war is devouring Russia's future. The narrative of Russian victory often points to its economy's apparent resilience against sanctions. But let's be clear, this is a dangerous illusion. The Kremlin has created a distorted, inefficient, and hollowed-out economy that is actively cannibalizing its civilian sector to feed the war machine. Here's the deal. At its heart is a massive diversion of national resources. For 2025, Russia has allocated an astonishing 41% of its entire federal budget, roughly $183 billion, to defense and security. This military Keynesianism is driving headline GDP growth, but it's fundamentally unproductive. The tanks and missiles being produced are assets immediately destroyed on the battlefield, contributing nothing to the long-term welfare of the Russian people. This growth comes at a direct cost. Spending on education, healthcare, and social policy is being slashed. The massive state spending has fueled rampant inflation and forced the central bank to hike interest rates to a punishing 21%, strangling any private business not involved in the war effort. The limits of this model are already showing, with the economy entering a contraction in the first quarter of 2025. Meanwhile, international sanctions have systematically degraded Russia's ability to produce sophisticated weapons and have hit its energy revenues. The irony is that Putin's quest for sovereignty has achieved the exact opposite. Russia has been forced into a position of deep and unequal dependence. It has become an economic lifeline for China, a raw materials appendage that needs Beijing far more than Beijing needs it. Militarily, it has been reduced to a client state, reliant on Iran for drones and even accepting thousands of soldiers from North Korea. This is not the reassertion of a great power, it's a profound strategic defeat. The unbroken nation. Now, contrast all that with what's happening on the other side, Ukraine's remarkable resilience. Far from collapsing, Ukraine has defended its sovereignty, reclaimed significant territory, and is now systematically imposing escalating costs directly upon the aggressor. Let's debunk a big myth right here, that Russia controls vast swaths of Ukraine. The reality on the ground is that Russia occupies only about 19 to 20% of Ukrainian territory, a figure that includes land seized back in 2014. Since 2022, Ukraine has proved its ability to liberate its land in stunning counteroffensives in the north, in Kharkiv, and in Kherson, the only regional capital Russia had managed to capture. The front remains fiercely contested, not conquered. But maybe the biggest game changer has been Ukraine's campaign to bring the war home to Russia. Using sophisticated, long-range domestic drones, Ukraine has systematically targeted the core of Russia's war machine. A concentrated campaign in early 2025 successfully struck at least 17 major Russian oil refineries, impacting an estimated 17% of the country's refining capacity, and crippling the revenue stream that funds the war. Other daring strikes have hit air bases deep inside Russia, destroying strategic bombers on the ground and disrupting critical supply lines. Ukraine now holds the strategic initiative in this domain, forcing Russia to pull valuable air defenses away from the front to protect its vulnerable heartland. This has all been made possible by an unprecedented global coalition. The US, EU, and UK have committed hundreds of billions in military and financial aid, providing Ukraine with the advanced Western technology needed to blunt Russia's quantitative advantage. Putin's invasion, meant to halt Ukraine's Western integration, has become its single greatest catalyst. He is inadvertently forging a modern, agile, and increasingly NATO-interoperable Ukrainian military on the battlefield. The Empire's last echo. And perhaps the ultimate, most damning verdict on this war lies beyond the battlefield, in the silent collapse of Russia's imperial project. Vladimir Putin's grand ambition was to restore a sphere of influence and cement Russia as a pole in a multipolar world. Instead, he has authored its definitive retreat, exposing a hollowed-out power now incapable of managing its own backyard. This isn't just a failure to advance. It's a full-scale geopolitical implosion. Consider the evidence. The Kremlin's authority is fracturing internally, a process laid bare by the aborted Prigozhin mutiny, which shattered the myth of Putin's absolute control and normalized the existence of rogue private armies. Externally, Russia's grip has evaporated. While its military is pinned down in Ukraine, former client states are openly defying Moscow. Azerbaijan decisively settled the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict on its own terms, sidelining Russian peacekeepers. Central Asian nations, once captive to Moscow's orbit, are now confidently pivoting towards China and the West for security and economic lifelines. They see Russia not as a reliable patron, but as a distracted, declining power. This is the war's final, crushing irony. In his violent quest to prevent Ukraine from leaving Russia's orbit, Putin has accelerated the flight of all its other satellites. He has not resurrected an empire, he has written its obituary. The slow, humiliating retreat from its own sphere of influence may be the most profound and lasting strategic defeat of all, a quiet unraveling that will long outlast the noise of the cannons. A reckoning with reality. So, is Russia winning? The evidence screams no. The narrative collapses under the weight of strategic, military, human, and economic reality. Russia began the war with the catastrophic failure of its plan to take Kyiv, a blunder that has dictated the disastrous course ever since. Its military has been decimated, suffering casualties on a scale not seen in its modern history, and resorting to 60-year-old tanks to fill the gaps. Its economy has been repurposed to serve a single destructive purpose, sacrificing its future for a war it cannot win, turning Russia into a junior partner to China and a client of Iran. Bottom line, Russia has failed to achieve any of its primary strategic objectives. It has not demilitarized Ukraine. It has supercharged its modernization. It has not stopped NATO expansion. It has catalyzed it. It has not reasserted itself as a great power. It has revealed its profound weaknesses and accelerated its own decline. Russia is not winning. It is locked in a Pyrrhic quagmire of its own making, waging a multi-front war of attrition against Ukraine, against the combined economic might of the West, and most devastatingly, against its own future. The narrative of Russian victory is not just misleading, it's a dangerous fiction that obscures the catastrophic reality of Vladimir Putin's ambition. This is not victory. It is a strategic defeat of historic proportions. If this is victory, what would defeat look like? Let us know your take in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more.